Alright everyone, welcome back to another Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes video with Fat Phil, and today we're going to be talking about the 2025 free-to-play farming guide, kind of give you an update on where I am, what I'm thinking, and kind of why you haven't seen one yet, because normally I try to get that out a lot earlier than it already is. I'm not sure how much free-to-play farming guides help right now, and I'm going to kind of walk through that, I think they are very good buzzwords to use. I think a lot of players love to hear them, but I don't know that there's a lot of value there anymore. And I think a lot of that has to do with how the game has progressed over the years. Some of the changes that have come in have really devalued a lot of what those guides offered because, the game's ever changing. And I'm going to use some comparisons to some different things, some pop culture references, of course, because it's a Fat Phil video. So please like and subscribe, comment down below. Let's give a shout out to our channel members, as always, for their continued support. If you're ever interested, that link's down below, along with a link to Discord. Go check it out. Thank you guys again for keeping the faith, for believing in me. You guys are a massive part of this channel. I wouldn't have continued to create if it wasn't for you guys doing what you do. So I appreciate you, showing that support, especially when videos suck. So appreciate you guys. Let's get in here. Let's talk about the 2025 kind of update on the free-to-play farming guide. Why I haven't made one yet, and I don't know if I will. Now, a lot of you probably clicked off because you're like, oh, no free-to-play farming guide, I'm not going to watch it. I'm going to be giving farming advice. It's just, I don't know that a necessarily guide of this team, this team, this team, this team is as helpful because the game is constantly evolving. Back when farming guides first became a thing, there was a constant, and that was the raids. You had the pit raid, the tank raid, the Sith Triumvirate raid, even the challenge pit raid. When those were the raids, it was very easy to create a farming guide because they were stagnant, right? Nothing moved in the game. Like, Conquest moved, but the raids stayed the same. Your territory battles, territory wars, Grand Arena, all of that was stagnant. Everything was in this nice little, hey, you can do this and you're going to be fine. Once they changed the raid system to be rotating, we had the Crate Dragon raid, then the Speeder Bike. Now we're in Naboo, and eventually I think we're going to be coming out of the Naboo raid. It's a lot harder to develop a free-to-play farming guide because advice that was solid a year ago isn't quite as solid now because you've got to account for the change in that raid. It's this game kind of experiences almost like, for lack of a better term, you could call it variable change. Right, which for those of you who don't know what variable change is, it's basically this, or I guess maybe the way to say this, right? If I talk about variable change, where I wanted to head with this. So, free-to-play farming now is kind of like variable change, where you can build a framework of things. So, what I mean is, it's hard to beat this, like, Farm Executor, Jabba, Leia, JML, and Leviathan. Like, if those were the 5 things that you're going to farm off the bat, those are your 5 first major farms, I think you'd be solid. And you're going to be like, Phil, how the hell am I supposed to get, like, Leviathan that early? This will take you well past 4 million galactic power and into Proving Grounds. So I don't want you to get discouraged. Like, this is honestly the path that I think I would use. A lot of you are going to fill in other gaps because you've gone for light speed bundles. Those kind of, and again, then you're not free to play, but those kind of fit in different places. I think now what we kind of need to do is account for variable change. And to describe variable change, one of my favorite movies of all time is 21, which is, it's such a funny, but it's one of my favorite movies. And they explain variable change as there are, 3 doors to pick a prize from. You pick door number 1. And then the host of the game show says, hey, there's a prize behind one of the doors, and then there's 2 goats. So you pick door number 1. Now there's door number 2 and number 3 left. And the host shows that door number 2 has a goat behind it. And the professor at this Harvard class or MIT is Kevin Spacey, and he's like, yeah, do you want to change doors? And the student is like, yes, I absolutely would. And kind of goes on to explain that it's not a 50-50 chance at that point. It's a 66% chance that the prize is behind door 3. Because when he first selected door 1, it was based on a 33% chance. So if you think through that, right, this 33% chance that it's behind door number 1, door 2, and door 3. But if you think of it in terms of there's a 33 it's behind door 1 and a 66 chance it's behind door 2 or door 3. So accounting for variable change, and so you pick door 3, and then he's like, you win the car because you guessed right, because that's where, more likely is. That's kind of what you have to do with Swago, is use that variable change. Now, what does that mean? So for example, you've got these, okay, here's your framework, right? Well, now you've got this raid rotating around. You had the crate raid, the speeder bike raid, the battle for Naboo. You kind of have to account now that, okay, there's going to be something new coming, right? You don't know what it is, but we can take a guess, right? You can guess that it's going to be something newer, right? Because you've got the Peridia Patrol characters, you've got the Ahsoka characters. Go back to the Night Sister team. There's all these new things that have come in. So whenever you're thinking through farming as a free-to-play, you've got to account for that variable change. Sometimes you might get it wrong, right? The example I would use there is go back to like the Separatists here. I thought the Stap would be a very important piece of the Battle for Naboo raid. I don't even need this thing, but I thought it'd be very important, so I went and I spent a lot of resources in the cantina to get this thing done. I could have saved all that and had signal data, but I wanted to be prepared, right? In this case, I was wrong. I also, though, was like, hey, you know what? I'm going to be building, my Gungans up. I'm going to be building my Queen Amidala and, Qui-Gon and stuff. And it paid off, right? I was, that variable change in those situations helped me. So as a free-to-play, what you've got to do is decide, I'm going to farm something newer in the hopes that it's going to be needed for that raid. Maybe you get it right, maybe you get it wrong, but you can kind of help make some of those decisions with a little bit more logic to it than just, oh, it's new. An example here, so when you think about like the next raid, you've got the, Ahsoka, right? Galactic Legends Ahsoka is new right now. We're still kind of waiting on the full impact of that team, but if you were a free-to-play and you were in a position where you could build that team, maybe it's a decision to have. Think about the new stuff, right? The new Imperial Remnants, the new Night Sisters, those are definitely things that you could be thinking about. Before we get into the whole, well, what about Mandos or Remnants, you've got to recognize that both of those characters, both of those factions, have been included in other raids, right? So this when you're thinking through the variable change, you're like, oh, they're just going to do Imperial Remnants. Well, just before you go too far there, Moff Gideon, Scout Trooper, Death Trooper, Stormtrooper, all of them were in the speeder bike raid, right? When you go to that speeder bike raid, come here, and you go to units, look, Moff Gideon, Scout Trooper, Death Trooper, Stormtrooper, those are all Imperial Remnants. If you go back to the Krayt Dragon raid, think about the Mandalorians for a second. In the Krayt Dragon raid, you had, like Maul himself, Beskar Armor Mando, you had Jango Fett, you had Bo-Katan Kryze, Canderous, OG Mando, Gar Saxon and Imperial Super Commando, Sabine Wren, the Armorer. You had a lot of those Mandalorian characters already here as well. So it's not to say that maybe we don't go back to that, but I don't know that we can quite say that we're going to get a Mando or Remnant raid when we've had those factions already. Maybe the newer characters, right? Enoch, Night Trooper, Death Trooper, Dark Trooper, Moff Gideon, Dark Trooper himself. Mandalorians, it's a little bit harder because we only really have 3 new ones in Bo, or I guess 4 new ones in Bo, Padawan Sabine, Paz, and IG-12 and Grogu. So if they threw Beskar Mando in there, that's fine. But again, we've already had them in a raid and they haven't really repeated characters yet. So there's a case to be made that if you're trying to think of getting ahead on something, maybe farming some of these new things again, you might get it wrong, but at least you're building something that's good, that's a little bit more current, and if you do get it right, winner, chicken dinner. And then even Revenge of the Sith. This is the 20th anniversary of Revenge of the Sith this year. Kenobi, Lord Vader, some of those things could be playing a role. Now, before you go crazy and you're like, well, Kenobi, you can't just say Galactic Republic, because again, a lot of these characters from Revenge of the Sith themselves, where I don't quite buy this, is thinking through the characters like Mace, Plo Koon, Coyote-Mundi, Luminara, Ayla, Eth Koth, Kit Fisto. Those are all characters that played a role in Revenge of the Sith. Obviously, General Kenobi, Commander Tano, Snip's not really. Padme could count that. General Kenobi, no, but, like you could maybe have a Jedi Master Kenobi team with some of those characters. But you also have, if you think about it, Lord Vader that side of like the Sith, right? Now it's not Empire, right? It'd be like Lord Vader, but what about those clones? What about clones from the 501st? Again, I don't know everything, but that's another option of maybe a Revenge of the Sith theme, or combine that with like Clone Wars or something. Bad Batch and Order 66 could be a theme of that raid. So by looking through all those things and accounting for variable change in your new farm, that's kind of what I would do as a free-to-play right now. I would pick one new thing that I feel I'm going to get the most value out of in my account. And by most value, remember, you're thinking not just, all right, I'm going to build the Peridia characters because they have an assault battle. If you have the Night Sister Lightspeed bundle right here, Great Mothers, Morgan, boom, that's value. Value isn't always what it gives you. It's also you also have to take into consideration, what are you spending to get there. That if you already have all the rest of the Night Sisters at relic levels, Morgan, Great Mothers, done, dusted, thumbs up, great work. If you have the pretty characters, great, good job. So think through that kind of thought process on, how to account for those things. So where does that leave us with the free-to-play farming guide? Like, am I going to do anything? Am I not? What I'm planning to do instead is I will create a free-to-play guide. As soon as the raid requirements come out, as soon as the new raid requirements come out, I will go ahead and start listing off the characters that I would build, not based off of how they're going to do in the raid, but based off of, hey, are they good or not? Think about, like, with the current Naboo raid, the characters that I would have told you to build, beforehand when we got these. I would have said the Gungans. I probably would have told you that the Maul Newt Sidious team, because those are Galactic Legend requirements, obviously, the new characters. So, we could have gotten a lot of these teams probably pretty correct. We might have picked the Separatist droids instead of the Luminara team, but you would have had a lot of these characters in the raid farmed already, because they're hits, because they're solid characters, or because they're needed somewhere else. So that's what we're going to do with this next raid, is I'm going to release as soon as possible. I will be showing you the characters that I would be building as a free-to-play, and you can kind of go through there and figure out which ones fit the best into your plans. And then once we've had that raid for a little bit, kind of update it to, here's the teams that I'm using, here's the best ones that we're seeing. And that way, you, again, kind of, complete that accounting for variable change. You're guessing at first, and then once you're making a decision. So I don't know. I hope this pop culture reference isn't lost on you guys, that you kind of get what I'm going after there. And maybe with 3 doors, I feel like sometimes that example, 3 doors isn't as easy to understand it. Think of it like 100 doors. If I gave you 100 doors to choose from and said pick one, and you pick door 1, and then I eliminate 98 of the remaining 99 doors, are you going to switch which door you selected? Yes. Because when you first picked something, you're like, okay, it's 1 in 100. If I now eliminate it down to, hey, there's 2 doors left, this one over here or the one that you selected earlier, you should always switch. Because 99% of the time, you will not have selected the correct, door. And it's the same thing in Swago, that just going through and blindly building something doesn't really help you. But if you have a framework to build from, like the characters I set up here, and then you start adding in some of those raid things as that raid gets closer, these newer characters come to be, you have a better idea of what to farm. And maybe you do get it wrong. Maybe there's a chance you do get it wrong, but at least you did something. At least you tried something and you went for it. So I hope this helps. And if it doesn't, tell me in the comments, and I'll, I don't know. It's a lot of work to do a farming guide. I don't know if I've ever really opened up. It's a lot of work. And it's a lot of work for something that I think has lost value. Just me personally, I feel they've lost value. And especially coming from somebody who isn't really, I feel, out of touch with a lot of the new stuff in the game, because there's way more resources available now. And I don't have the time to be able to play 2 accounts. I've tried a bunch of times and it's never worked out. So, as somebody who can admit, listen, I'm kind of out of touch with that really early stuff, as soon as you get to that point where you have Executor, I feel I can really help you. That's kind of like, farming guides are great up to point X, and then that's where I would say my knowledge kicks in of, I can give you all these pieces of advice once you have that basic framework. So you don't need a step-by-step guide of this. If you follow this basic framework of Executor, Java, Leia, JML, and then getting the Leviathan, I think those are kind of the first 5 that make the most sense right now. Obviously, that can change, but let's say Leviathan changes to something else. You have so much time if you're still at Leia. So, like, that's kind of the beauty of this, is that, like, your Java, Leia, JML should be, like, the 3 easy GLs to get as a free-to-play, because there's so much there. And then you have that chance to build what's new and what's hot and not feel like you don't have anything to support it. So, again, that's the video. Let me know your thoughts down below. Like, subscribe, comment. I love you all. May the force be with you, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers, my friends.